remembered to tell
There we go.
everyone that's
Okay.
speaking that we do record these. So great. All right. Well, welcome to Coffee with a Purpose, everybody, and welcome to all of our guests who are either current members of the Morse Library Trustees or running for the position. So this is just continuing our process of having sessions where any town office that's contested, more people running than there are seats available, or try to get as many of the candidates as possible to give them a chance to come speak to us and tell us why they want to be in that position. So we've got, as I understand it, I think we have 4.5 of the library trustee candidates. We have 4 of you lovely folks in person. We'll have Kathleen start us off and include a few comments as to what the library trustee position is for those of us, raising my own hand at least, that are somewhat ignorant about that. Jerry was one person that could not be here at all. He's been taking a bunch of mini post-COVID vacations, so good for him and his family. And Anna, although she can't be here in person, she did write a little short bio of herself and included a lovely picture. So I will have Sarah read that to the group, so we'll get a little bit of snapshot of her. Normally we start with introductions, but because of all of the Coffee with a Purpose regulars, but because we have so many speakers, I'd like to dispense with that. And as we get to the open question and answers, if anyone's asking a question, they can introduce themselves, but I will just describe us, as I think I have in the emails, as a group of very committed Natick residents, heavy into volunteer activities and a plethora of interests for social good. So with that,
Actually, why don't you just point out the 4 people who are here, who are the candidates? I think you
oh
mentioned.
yeah, that's right.
The other 3, just so people know.
Yeah, so hang on just a second here. Where we at? We've got Tom Hourihan there, and he's in my lower left. We have Kathleen Donovan, who's the current president. Is that the right term?
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. Carol Gloff and Sally McCoubry. Did I pronounce that name correctly?
You did. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, with that, why don't I turn it to Kathleen first, and then maybe I'll have Sarah read Anna's statement, and then we can go with the rest of the 3 candidates. And we'll just take the time as we can, however much time each person would like, but let's try to reserve a lot of time for discussion and questions. And as usual, we'll use the raise hand feature if we're individually able to do that. So, Kathleen, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you all for inviting us to be here. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to talk about something we love, which is the Morse Institute Library. I'm currently serving as president on the library board. And before I just tell you a little bit about my background and also about what library trustees do, I did promise Gerald Mazor I would repeat his regrets that he can't be here today. Jerry joined the board in 2006, and he has been reelected 3 times. As we've just heard, he is away with his grandkids on being a good granddad and taking them away on school vacation for a nice break. So he's not able to be with us, but he is a candidate for re-election, and he would appreciate your vote. So, for Jerry.
Great.
Okay, so a little bit about me and my background. I've lived in Natick for 33 years. And my profession is librarian. I have a master's degree in library science from Simmons, what is now called Simmons University, Simmons College in my day. I had worked at the Harvard Graduate School of Education as a research librarian my entire professional career. About 2 years ago, Harvard made an early retirement offer, and I decided it was time for a change. So I wound up that part of my career When I moved to Natick, I wanted to become involved with the community, and I wanted to make connections and good friends. So an obvious choice for me was to get involved with the library. I started my involvement there by joining the Friends, which was a fledgling organization at that point. I eventually was on the steering committee of the Friends and served as president in the mid-late 90s. I was fortunate to be president at the point that the renovated Morse reopened, and I will forever remember the reopening ceremony. They had a lovely yellow ribbon strung across the entranceway to the library, and there were probably about 6 or 8 adults who all had some role in this and were given the opportunity to put a teeny cut in the yellow ribbon. We were told not to cut all the way through because that final honor was going to go to a child, and it was actually Dr. Keefe's grandchild who cut the ribbon all the way through. So that's one of my fond memories of the Friends and also the library. I ran for the board initially in 2001. When an opening appeared midterm, it seemed like a good opportunity to take a couple of years to see what the board was like and decide if I liked it. Well, 22 years later, I guess, I liked it. I have kept putting my name back on the ballot and had the honor to be reelected to the board. Why have I stayed so many years? I think it's really 2 things. I see the role that public libraries play in supporting the learning and the personal growth of all residents of the community. And I mean every demographic, from toddler to senior. The public library is there for everybody. And I think that's a unique role of this type of institution. The other reason I've continued is that I really strongly believe in the role that public libraries can play in being a place that brings people together. And I think that that's more important than ever right now. So I value libraries for the opportunity that they give people, the space, the place they provide for people that might not know each other or talk to each other normally to come together around a shared interest, whether it's a program, a collection, a speaker, an activity, so that we can all meet each other and learn from each other. So I think those are the 2 reasons that I have continued in my role and put my name up each time. And those are the 2 key reasons I'm asking for your vote today. So Doug also asked me to speak a little bit about what a trustee does. And I think most people, unless they are library employees, really have no clue what a library trustee does. So it's a great opportunity for us to put the word out a little bit. So I'm going to give you like 1 minute of history here, a little history lesson, which is important to understand the Morse trustees. And that is to be sure that everybody knows that the Morse Institute Library was created in 1863 by a bequest from Mary Ann Morse, who had the vision and the passion for what a public library could be. And she left her entire estate, including the land that the library now stands on, to the town of Natick for the purposes of building a public library to serve all the inhabitants of Natick. The town accepted the will, the bequest, and work began. And part of her will was stipulations about the board. And so she required that a board of 5 be created, an elected board, and that the board members would serve 5-year terms. So we're a little bit unusual in that we have this longer term, and it comes from the will. The original board took the bequest from Mary Ann Morse, discovered, lo and behold, it was not quite enough money to build the library she envisioned. So they took about 8 or 10 years to grow those funds. And in 1873, the first Morse Institute Library opened. So that's the little history lesson. 2 little fun facts. 2 weeks after the library opened was the Great Fire in downtown Natick. The library survived happily. And the other fact, if you want to do a little math with 1873, you might figure out that we're celebrating our 150th anniversary this year. So there's a lot going on at the library for that. So what does a board do, a library board? We're a lot like other boards. We are there to make the sort of high level governance decisions that are behind the library's operation. The day-to-day work, the operational stuff, that all falls to the library administration and the library staff. I think the most important piece of work we may do is to hire the director. And we recently hired our current director. She's been with us, Mickey Wolf, for about 1.5 years. The director really sets the tone for the work at the library and is responsible for so much. So who you hire is critical. The next most important role of the trustees, I would say, is setting the mission and the vision of the library. This is something that is revisited and revised from time to time, and we just rewrote these last summer. So if you bear with me, they're short and pithy. I hope you'll agree. I'm going to read them to you because I think it helps you understand, again, how this board approaches their work. So the vision of the Morse Institute Library is: we envision a library community where everyone can thrive and find joy in learning, discovery, and personal growth. Our mission is to inspire minds, enrich lives, enable learning, and foster connections throughout our community by providing open and equal access to cultural, intellectual, and community resources. Next on the list for the board, strategic plans. Like a lot of organizations and nonprofits, libraries are governed by strategic plans. The Morse, for a number of years, has worked with a 5-year strategic plan. We just completed our most recent one last summer. As strategic plans do, it sets key goals and objectives and helps us keep ourselves accountable to where we see the library going, where we want the library to go. The actions and activities that move the library in the direction of accomplishing these goals, these are proposed by the library administration and managed by the library staff. Next on our list, setting library policies. These are typically brought to the board for discussion. The library will see a need for a policy or a need for a policy to be updated and revised. They're brought to the board. The board discusses, amends them, and approves them eventually. Examples of policies that the Morse has would be things that cover collection development, which is a fancy phrase for what stuff does the library choose to buy and put it in its collection. Another policy would be around use of our meeting rooms. A policy I think we're particularly proud of that was adopted about a year and a half ago is a fine-free policy. And this was a policy the library adopted to ensure that we only charge fines for very, very high use, high demand items. And those would be our speed read books, which just go out for 2 weeks because they're in such high demand, or our museum passes. Other than that, we don't want fines keeping people away from the library. We want people to be able to use the library, and studies and data public libraries have run have shown that fines don't bring books back. What fines do is keep people from coming in and using the library. And last on our list is I would say we serve as a sounding board for the library director. So she is looking to set major initiatives and directions for the library to go, and she will bring those to the board for discussion. She'll bring activities and ideas for the board to review and make suggestions. So we're sort of a sounding board for her. A couple initiatives that I can cite right now would be a major emphasis to connect better and collaborate better with other town departments, such as the senior center and the schools, or other town initiatives like our focus on sustainability and recycling. And I might point out the craft swap that happened as a recycling event about 2 weeks ago. The board also has to, of course, understand the state and local regulations that apply to public libraries. Along with the library administration, we're responsible for ensuring we're in compliance with those laws and regulations. These include standards, which are set by the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. That is the oversight agency for public libraries in the state of Massachusetts. Meeting their certification requirements, for example, is quite important because that is what allows the Morse Institute Library to receive about $40,000 to $50,000 of state aid each year for the library to use as it best sees fit. It also allows us to apply for grants from the MBLC. And an example of a grant we had about 1.5 years ago was for hotspots that we were able to circulate to help people, especially people working from home or students doing schoolwork during the COVID period to make their internet access more reliable. Trustees also advocate for the library. This is a really important role. And the most obvious example probably for those involved in the town is advocacy for a sufficient budget for the library to be able to do the work that it needs to and that town residents want it to. We also need to, as trustees, ensure that residents know what the library has to offer. And this is always a challenge to get people to understand what's there for them and that we're interested in knowing what isn't there that they would like to be there. And lastly, I think the trustees have an important role in recognizing the good work of the staff, and that might be internal recognition, but it's also a public speak about the good work that everyone there does. So that's my version of what a public library board does.
Well, thank you so much, Kathleen. That's a great introduction, not only to you, but yeah, as you say, to the job of trustee. So let's have Anna and Absentia jump to the head of the line here. Let me first, let's see, somewhere I've got a photograph of her that I wanted to share. Oh, here it is. So here's Anna, and here's a document that Sarah will read.
All right. I'm sorry that I'm not able to be with you via Zoom today and appreciate the chance to introduce myself to you asynchronously via Doug and Sarah. My name is Anna McMahan. I've been a resident of Natick since 2007. My wife and I moved to Natick because she was starting a job in Boston and I was starting medical school in Worcester, and we needed something in between. We couldn't have found a better town for us and our family. I was born and raised in Tennessee, moved to Massachusetts for college, and planned to be a Natick resident for life. I'm a family medicine physician and work as a primary care physician and the medical director at the Edward M. Kennedy Community Health Center in Worcester. I'm in clinic all day today, which is why I can't join you via Zoom. My clinic serves a diverse refugee and immigrant population and gives full spectrum care, including pregnancy care. My clinic days are often like a tour of the world. It's fun and challenging and humbling. I also have a special focus on providing gender-affirming care to our transgender and gender-diverse patients. My wife, Kirsten, works in financial management in Boston, and our two boys, Lucas and Andrew, are both at Wilson after attending Benham. Lucas is in 7th grade and Andrew is in 5th grade. The boys have been a part of Natick's soccer, basketball, and hockey programs, more examples of how lucky we are to have landed in Natick. I have a special love for libraries that started when I was young and continued into adulthood. We have been frequent users of the Morse Institute as a family, and I have been continually impressed and grateful for all the offerings that the Morse Institute has for people of all ages and backgrounds. When COVID hit and so many public spaces had to close, I was overwhelmed with how much effort everyone involved with the Morse Institute put into making books and services as available as they safely could be. Even when the libraries of other towns had no services available, we could still get books through the incredible effort of the staff at the Morse. It was at that time that I thought about how I could contribute to the wonderful institution that is the Morse Institute Library. I share Mary Ann Morse's founding vision of a library that disseminates training and learning and intelligence to Natick residents. The current modern version of the Morse Institute does an amazing job of making that learning and intelligence accessible to people of all ages, walks of life, backgrounds, and educational levels, and I want to help continue that work. Ideally, the board reflects some of our town's diversity as well, and I can contribute to that as both a parent of school-age kids and a member of the LGBTQ+ community. My son Andrew has already started making suggestions of things he would like to see at the library, and my son Lucas has just started to spend more time in the teen room. Engaging young readers is an important part of any library and something I hope the Morse Institute continues to do well. Regardless of the outcome of March's elections, I am grateful to be a part of the Morse Institute community and a frequent user. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or comments by email, which Doug is going to put in the chat. Thank you for the civic work you do for Natick.
Thank you for reading that, Sarah. And I appreciate Anna getting that information to us. So let's move on, let's see, to additional candidates. Sally, would you like to speak?
Sure. Thank you.
Oh, I'll stop the share here, sorry. There we go.
Yes, thank you for inviting us this morning and for your interest in learning more about the Library Board of Trustees. Excuse me, my voice isn't the best in the morning. Thank you also, Kathleen, for giving such a great background as to what we do as a group. I've lived in Natick for 42 years, and I've been a member of the Library Board of Trustees for 10 years, during which time I have served as the secretary. Being such a small board of only 5, you can imagine that we all have to pull our weight. And last year, it was my privilege to serve as the trustee liaison to work with the director and a small committee to draft our current strategic plan. Of course, the strategic plan is the work of the entire board, but it was my responsibility to report to the board each month and to receive their feedback and incorporate it into the process. That was a 10-month assignment, intense at times, but very worthwhile, and it renewed and strengthened my commitment to continue serving on this board. I started working with the library, as Kathleen did, as a charter member of the Friends group in 1992. I served on their steering committee for 12 years, over about an 18-year period. While on the steering committee, I served as treasurer for 8 years, and in my final 4-year term, I served as an at-large member, secretary, vice president, and president. So I covered all the bases there. Then in 2013, I decided I wanted to contribute to the library in a different role. So I ran for election to the Board of Trustees. I have a bachelor's degree in business and a master's degree in business management, and worked for several businesses and organizations in Cambridge and in Boston. Then in 1992, I decided I was tired of commuting and decided to start my own bookkeeping practice for small businesses, professionals, and individuals. I ran that practice and grew it for about 25 years until I retired in 2017. I've served on several other boards over the years focused on health and fitness, and I served on the Natick Service Council board for 3 years. But it is on this library board that I find my most personal commitment and where I feel I can make my best contribution. This is primarily because I have a passionate respect for the institution of the library and the equality, access, and opportunity it offers. Libraries are the one institution that serves everyone equally, regardless of your age, your gender, your economic status, your social status, your learning abilities, your disabilities. The library is open and free to everyone. But it takes work and leadership to assure the continuation of that unbiased and welcoming place. I'm running for re-election because I want to ensure that the library maintains that freedom for everyone and for everyone to learn and enrich their lives. So thank you, and I'd appreciate your vote.
All right, great. Thank you, Sally. How about Carol? Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. And just in general, thank Coffee with a Purpose for offering this opportunity and for offering the opportunity to all candidates for contested seats, because I know you're offering opportunities to select board candidates and school committee candidates this year as well.
Right.
So as you all know, I'm a candidate for the Morse Institute Library trustee position, and I'm the newest member of the trustees. I've only been on the trustee board for 2 years. I was elected in 2021 to fill the rest of the term that had been held by Elliot Goodman, who had chosen to resign, and unfortunately we lost Elliot last year. A little bit about my background. I'm a scientist. I started my career as a pharmacist. I received my BS in pharmacy from the University at Buffalo. And then after a couple of years of working as a pharmacist, I moved to San Francisco, big move, and got my PhD in pharmacokinetics. And for those of you who don't know what pharmacokinetics is, most people don't, it's really how your body handles drugs, how it absorbs them, gets rid of them, etc. And then I worked in on a variety of diseases in developing new treatments, first in a series of 3 companies, and then as an independent consultant. And I ended up in the Boston area because I took a job after my first job, which was in the San Francisco area. So I've been living in Natick for just over 30 years. I moved here in the summer of 1992. And I became involved in local government in the late 1990s. In 1997, I was appointed to the Natick Finance Committee. I'd already been serving on the recycling committee, and I'll talk about my background with the library in a minute. But I was appointed to the Finance Committee, and I spent 8 years there. And then I ran for the Select Board. And in 2005, I was elected, and I was elected 3 times to the Natick Select Board. I chose not to run again in 2014. And it's really hard for me to believe that it's just, I've been off the Select Board as many years as I was on it, but life goes by rapidly. So, and I've been a town meeting member for much of the time. I didn't count up the number of years. And then because I guess I'm like being involved, I've served on a bunch of other town committees, like the Fire Chief Screening Committee one time and things like that. And I'm currently on the Town Governance Study Committee. One other thing I've done with the town is I've actually worked in the town clerk's office in 2020 and in 2022 during the state and national election periods of time. Each time the town clerk's staff has been short a person. And as you might imagine, it's extremely hectic then. And I'm willing to answer the phone or, take notes or go up to the window and say, I don't know the answer to that, but let me get somebody who does. And they've actually taught me to scan the barcodes on the ballots, which doesn't tell me how you voted. It just tells us that you actually did vote. So, okay. Now let me tell you a little bit about my history with libraries. I love libraries. As you might imagine, I spent a lot of time in libraries when I was an undergraduate and graduate school. But my history goes back to when I was a toddler, and my sister loves to tell this story. So I wasn't really old enough to walk to the library, which was over a half a mile away. So my mother, this is in about the mid-1950s, you can figure out my age from that. My mother would put me in the little red wagon, and she and my sister would walk to the library and go along, and we would get books. And then I used that library tremendously as I was growing up. It was a very small town of about 1,000 people, so the library was one of the places to go. Looking at in Natick, as I already said, I moved to Natick in 1992, and within a couple of years, I had joined the Friends of the Morse Institute Library. I met Kathleen and Sally. They were on the steering committee then, and I've been a member since that time. And in fact, when I joined and I started showing up to things, they were the whole steering committee was very, very nice and kind of sucked me into getting involved in being on the steering committee. And I say that with a smile because I've enjoyed every minute of it. But so I've served on the steering committee of the Friends from 1995 to 1995, again from 2011 to 2013, and then from 2017 to 2001, when I resigned to run for the library trustee position that I now hold. I also, in the past, as Sally said, the entire trustees are involved in the strategic planning, but she took the lead because you've got to have one person who serves on kind of the steering committee. They also have an advisory committee. And back in, I'm trying to remember if it's when I was in the finance committee or the select board, I served on that advisory committee for the strategic plan that was done back then, because we do a new strategic plan about every 5 years, if I remember correctly. And I've always been an advocate, both when I was on finance committee and with town meeting and the select board, all the opportunities aren't really there, for the library budget and for any particular things that the library might need. So for example, when I was pretty new on the finance committee, the library was asking for money to buy a new bookmobile. And some members of the finance committee didn't really see the need for that. I advocated strongly for that. And as you may or may not know, the town did fund a new bookmobile at that time. Aside from all that, I love libraries and I feel like I can make a difference there because of what libraries have done for me. That's where I come from originally. But what I've seen libraries do for other people. I've seen people who, maybe older people, and I'm one of them now, who are looking for a place to go and to, relax and maybe go to a program. I've seen moms take their toddlers, or even prior to being toddlers, to the library for programs, or to play with the toys and the setups in the children's area. And also maybe it gives them a few minutes to just sit in a comfortable chair and watch their child, but to be someplace other than at home. I've seen programs, I've known people who've taken advantage of programs at the library to help them look for a job, to help them update their resume or get ideas from other job seekers. And I've been to musical concerts, plays, art exhibits, etc., and watched the diversity of the people from our community and beyond who come and use our library. And I want to be able to continue to support that, to provide my input and offer my emotional, financial, whatever support so that our library will continue to thrive and get even better. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. And we've got Tom as well. Tom, would you like to speak?
Of course. Well, thank you for this opportunity, Doug. Greetings and happy President's Day, everybody. Obviously, I'm the new person here on the block. And as all of you, I am a great lover of the library, frequent user of it. I grew up in Needham, and I've lived in Natick for about the last 25 years. And I was inspired to run for the library trustee position, or one of the trustee positions, by Joe Keefe, who talks passionately about the library and the history of the library, as well as the board and the staff. I am a teacher. Much of my career was in Concord. I was a grade 5 teacher most of the time. I retired from public schools about 3 years ago. I'm presently back in my old neighborhood teaching 6th grade math to St. Joseph students, the St. Joseph School, which is about a block from my house. I have a lot of experience with committees, at least in the public sector at Concord, because I was the head of the Concord Teachers Association about 5 years, a vice president a number of years, as also head of our faculty senate for about 2 decades, and I was heavily involved with contract negotiations of the Concord teachers contracts for the last 20 years or so, the head negotiator for a number of those contracts. I'm heavily involved with analyzing the budget in Concord for the times when I was involved with public schools, attending FinCom meetings, meeting with the financial director of the schools. So the bulk of my time has been spent actually more involved with Concord than it was Natick, but now I've transitioned away from Concord and not quite full time at St. Joe's. I have more time now to try to devote to what is now my hometown, and I see the library as it's a wonderful institution. I read a quote last night talking about good libraries build services, great libraries build communities, and I think the Morse Institute definitely strives to build communities where everybody feels welcome it's interesting we're having this discussion on President's Day because the library is the most democratic of all institutions. It's a real gem for any municipality, and what we have here in Natick is just outstanding, just physically and appearance in terms of the programming. It's looking through the vision plan. It's hard to believe that they offered 1,400 programs over the preceding year. So the library has a tremendous amount to offer. I'd like to do what I can to maintain what is happening, has been happening, and I look forward to hopefully gaining your vote. It's a shame that there are 6 people running for 5 positions, because it seems like everybody who's running is very worthy. So thank you. I'll take any questions if people would like more information.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks to all of you. And I've been seeing that Dr. Keefe is also on the call. I guess I'd certainly like to invite him to offer any remarks in support of the library and the trustee position that he's served in, if he cares to come online. I don't know if he's actually at the computer or not, but give the pregnant pause, and he can always jump in later if he would like. All right. I echo what you say, Tom. It is a shame that this is a contested race. Man, what a lot of great qualifications that everybody has. I see Pat has got his hand up. So Pat, let's start with your question. You got to come off mute there.
Good morning. It's very good to hear from all of you, Carol and Sally and Tom. I have a kind of a basic question though. Is the Morse Institute related? I mean, your governance and anything to the Bacon Library? I don't know how the two, they're totally separate. Is that correct? I just was trying to. Yeah. Okay.
I guess did somebody nod there?
Well, I shook my head. I was actually talking with Dr. Keefe yesterday about this. It's a private entity, although apparently, and library trustees, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it does receive, the state apparently treats it somewhat like a public institution, but it is a private institution, and that they do receive some funding from the state. Kathleen, is that correct?
Yeah, if I can jump in here, if that's all right. Yes, the Bacon was founded by will as well, about the same time as the Morse. And so they are separate institutions, but for the purposes of the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, we actually file jointly our report, and the state aid that we receive, we give a proportion to the Bacon. I believe it's based on circulation numbers, but it's a proportionate amount that does go to the Bacon. So from the states, for the state's purposes, they see us jointly, but technically they are separate institutions. They collaborate a lot, and there's going to be just more and more of that going on.
Good. Thank you.
How about from the town's perspective in terms of budget support? Are there separate allocations made to each library?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Does that produce any tension between the institutions in terms of like who's going to get more money, or just how it's going to be used? Or
I have to say, I have never felt it's a competitive relationship. I think we both see each other as fulfilling different needs of the community, but all working towards the same goal. And especially right now, I know the staffs are very close. The current director of the Bacon was formerly the assistant director of the Morse. So there's a real good working relationship right now.
Good. Carol, you wanted to add? Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that, given my years on the finance committee and on the select board and in town meeting, I've never seen any competition for money. The town has always tried to provide the appropriate level of money to each of the libraries. The Morse Institute is much larger, and is open more hours, has larger staff, has a larger collection, etc. But the town understands that not only is the Morse extremely important, so is the Bacon, and so it gets, I believe, an appropriate amount of money. But they have their own board of directors and everything, or whatever the right name is.
Yeah, cool. Martin, you had your. Oh, I'm sorry, Sally. You wanted to add to discussion. Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to add, not on the financial point, but on the fact that we collaborate more and more with the Bacon. That's one of our goals, is to have a continuing and long relationship with them, helping to serve all of Natick better by using both libraries, the strengths of both libraries. One of the ways that we've been doing that, and it started during COVID, that was to have our van that we're using now, that our bookmobile unfortunately is off the road. We have a van, and it's been delivering books between the two libraries daily, so the patrons can get their materials faster. And this is just one of the many collaborations that we're working on with the Bacon. So they're two separate entities, separate boards of directors and trustees, but we work very, very closely together.
Great. Thank you. And Martin. Yeah.
I have a question. I just want to mention what I don't think anybody has mentioned explicitly yet, which is that this is a rather unusual and special election for library trustees, because first of all, it only happens every 5 years. Second of all the trustees are elected at once, as opposed to most boards which have staggered terms. And thirdly, that last time this happened 5 years ago, there were 5 incumbents who were reelected, and now, because Dr. Keefe is not running for reelection after many, many years of service, there is essentially an open seat, so that it gives us an opportunity to actually look at the 2 new people, pretty openly. My question, though, is about library hours, because I do remember pretty clearly of 20 years ago, the early 2000s, there was severe budget cuts in the town, and the library hours, one evening was cut, one morning was cut, and Sunday hours were cut. And I was actually part of a little rabble rouser group in town meeting to restore the Sunday hours, which sort of succeeded eventually. So I guess my question is whether there's any concern about having to cut back the hours. Actually, the 9 to 10 a.m. hours I thought were cut for a while, and those are even back now. So we're in great shape now. But is there any concern about having to cut back library hours? And if so, what would your approach be in choosing the hours to cut, or to choose other cuts, or to find more money, or how would you deal with that sort of thing?
Kathleen?
Yeah, I'll respond to that. In the previous strategic plan, which was a 5-year plan, as you said, and just expired last summer, we made a commitment to expand hours, because we knew from our surveys that that's what people really wanted most. And we were able to actually add 6 or 7 hours back into the schedule. And that was without asking for more money from the town. So the previous director looked very carefully at usage, at scheduling, worked closely to establish trust among the staff, and then after about a year, proceeded to work with staff to re-envision scheduling and how we might handle that at the Morse. And as a result of that, we were able to add that 9 to 10 hour that you mentioned, Martin, back in Monday to Friday. We added a 5 to 6 hour on Friday, which was new. And we also were able to put back that Sunday hour that it had to be cut. So we understand the demand for access to the library. When you survey, unfortunately, people want all kinds of different hours. So it's not one clear-cut hour that we just got to nail that hour and then we're good with the community. So we know basically people want as much access as possible. So libraries are very data-driven. We know when people are in there. We know when people are checking things out. We try to use that information to come up with the best schedule that will support our community. But we're very committed to offering as many hours as we can do on our budget. The Mass Board of Library Commissioners, which I mentioned, does have a regulation or standard there that we have to meet. And for a community of our size, it's 62 hours. I believe right now the Morse has either 63 or 64 hours. Previously, we needed to work with the Bacon, because for the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, we can count any distinct hours Bacon offers as part of hours of service offered to the community. So we used to need to rely on a couple hours in the Bacon schedule to meet that standard, and very happy to say now we're at least 1 or 2 hours over the standard required of us just on our own hours alone. So I think the board really understands that access is very important to the community. And we would look for creative ways if we needed to add hours. I do not anticipate a need to cut hours. If that need should arise, we would think very creatively about how we could keep the most hours and the most appreciated hours for our community.
Thank you. And Sally, you wanted to add to that?
Very, very briefly, not to, Kathleen made a terrific explanation about the hours and how they've been added back. But one other thing that we have added over the years is our lockers, which is an initiative over the last couple of years. And I don't know whether many of you know about it, but on Clarendon Street, we have these book lockers where if you want to pick up your materials and the library is closed, if you happen to work out of town and you always get back and the library is closed, you can request your materials be left in the lockers and pick it up 24/7. This is a project that started during COVID, and we're hoping to see that it's working well and maybe expand it as part of our outreach effort to other parts of the community.
That's fantastic. I did not know about that. Although it's edging to a question that I wanted to ask. Anna, in the comments that Sarah read for us, was appreciative of kind of how the library had responded to COVID and seemed to be ahead of some of the other town libraries in finding creative ways to make services available. Can any of you talk to kind of what processes are in place to kind of brainstorm or talk to other community libraries and share the best of the best ideas and, you know, try new things? Is there some kind of active dialogue going on there? Yeah, Kathleen.
I'll start in, and others can join me. The Minuteman Library Network, which is what the Morse belongs to, has, I think, about 41 libraries in it. It's a very tight network, so the directors talk to each other through that network all the time. I know our director is very aware of what's happening statewide and regionally and beyond. So she is always monitoring for new good ideas that we can adapt and appropriate at the Morse. I think library directors are really good at sharing and or stealing good ideas from each other. Libraries are all about sharing for free. So I think that happens with ideas as well. And I think the key here is to have a director who's open and receptive and actively looking for new and creative approaches. And I would certainly say that of our current director, and also was quite true of our previous director, Jason Homer.
Cool, good. Anybody to add to that? Otherwise, we'll go to Brinley has her hand up with a question. Brinley?
Good morning, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. First, I just would love to sing some praises. I love the library and everything that happens. I have to say I'm beyond grateful for the bookmobile. Miss it, really look forward to it coming back. I hope that we always continue to keep it in our community. It was one of our son's first outside voyage when Rose used to come visit Nettie's Nook with the bookmobile, was the most favorite day of the week and the month with the preschool. And so I really do hope we continue to keep that. I think it's fabulous, and Rose is so awesome. I am grateful that our library is so all-encompassing. I think the CD program, the arts, adding the arts in our community, and the art shows, I think are really wonderful, and I really hope we continue that. I myself use some of the art programs. I got to go to the dot mandala art and have done other things with the kids, and I'm really just grateful for all the two things that I'm interested in is, as I have a high schooler, I'm interested in expanding service hours for high school students and finding more opportunities for that. And I'm wondering if there's any more opportunity to incorporate service hours for high school students at the library. And then also, I'm always interested. I am very politically minded. I talk a lot in town with people about how our town functions, and I know that we have a committee to reevaluate where we are. But in the meantime, I would love to see some type of civics course, some types of civics outreach to better facilitate our community knowing how our town functions currently and moving forward. And I'm wondering if that's any type of interest for any of you in working with people to how to make that kind of thing happen. Thank you.
Sally?
Thank you very much for those acclimates, those comments. It's always good to hear what we're doing right. And certainly the two suggestions, I've written them down, that you made, we will talk about and see what we can do. I especially appreciate your comments about the bookmobile. We are very sad when we had to finally take the bookmobile off the road, but as we talked earlier, we rented a van and we continue to rent that van. And we're very happy to say last week at our trustees meeting, we learned that there was some movement in the building of our new bookmobile. It has been a long process. It got caught up in, of course, COVID and all of the supply chain problems, but we finally have some movement. It is starting to be built, and hopefully it will be on the road sooner than we had originally had thought. So we all love the bookmobile. I think it makes our community very unique. We will never not have the bookmobile as long as I'm a trustee. I grew up with bookmobiles myself, living in a community that was quite a ways from the library. I remember it coming. So I know how important they are. And I agree with you, Rose is an absolute gem on our staff. So thank you.
Great. Who else has got a Carol, you had your hand up. Could come off mute. There you go.
Yeah, hi. So I agree with everything that Sally said. Brinley, I wanted to touch on the civics class. I guess I'll use that term. I'm not certain if that's the term you used or not. I'm wondering if you're thinking that the town should offer that, because the town does offer the citizens, I think it's called the Citizens Leadership Academy. It did offer it. I believe it's coming back. Or if you're thinking of something else. So if I could have a little, if Brinley wouldn't mind responding and telling me what she had in mind, a little bit more about what she had in mind, I might be able to give a better answer.
Sure. Thank you for asking for clarification. And I'm very glad to hear the leadership course might be coming back. I've been wanting to take it, so I've been disappointed that it's been down. I think that leadership class is more involved than what I'm referring to. I would like to see and kind of an outline. Hey, come spend an hour and we'll tell you how it works. For instance, so many questions came up when we were going through the dam process and understanding why the select board has the role that it has in the ownership of the dam. Understanding why we have a planning board and a select board and a school committee, and just more of a structural outline for how government works in our town. Because I find that even though I'm familiar with all of it, I would love there to be something that I can say to people, here, go here. The reference library will have all of that laid out, and here's a course that you can take that we offer twice a year, or every quarter, or before every election, or however it could work, so that it's an easier, quicker way for people to understand kind of the government tree of our town, as it were.
Okay, that's very helpful. I know there was something a few years ago before COVID put on by Yes for Natick, to talk about some aspects of what you just described. I don't think all, but I can understand the need and the desire for people to understand our government better. And as I am also currently working on the Town Governance Study Committee, where we're looking at our form of government and trying to think about, are there things that could be done better? Are there things that aren't working well that maybe should be changed? We should keep that in mind, that the community, we have already talked a bit about communication, getting the word out to the public. And that's a piece, I think, of what you're talking about, Brindley. So you and I should probably talk further.
I would love to, Carol. I feel like since the library is such a great resource for us, that it's a third party, non-politically minded opportunity to just give the facts, nothing but the facts, ma'am, of how it works.
Okay.
Yeah, Kathleen, did you want to add to that?
Just to add, I think that these are great ideas, and just to pick up on what Brindley and Carol were just talking about, and this sort of trusted third party. Librarians love to organize knowledge and document things. So, if someone wanted to work on something like that, or work with a library staff member on some sort of presentation, I bet you they would be happy to use a tool they have, which is called a LibGuide, and they use it constantly to pull information together in their digital library, explain things briefly, link to things. So I could see a beautiful, LibGuide coming out about Natick town governance, provided someone was maybe willing to work with a staff member on it. So it's a great idea.
Is that the type of thing that we could offer as service hours to high school students, as a way for high school students to get more service hours? Are there opportunities for high school students to get service hours at the library?
There are opportunities, and I should be able to give you more of them. I know, for instance, the Friends have offered service hours at the book sales that support the library. I don't know off the top of my head, unfortunately, what the library is doing, but we do have a teen librarian, and I'm sure she could speak to this. It's a good idea, and I suspect we are offering other types of service hours, but unfortunately, I can't speak to that. I don't know if any of the other trustees can.
Thank you.
Let's see. Tom, I had wanted to invite you to add to that conversation at all, but particularly as to, being somewhat the new kid on the block. What kinds of things could you see happening at the library along that civics education idea?
Well, as a teacher, I think civics is vitally important. It's a shame some of the ignorance that is, well, the amount of ignorance that is out there among not only the young kids, but also young adults as well, as students. I want to be careful, though, in terms of what the role of the trustees is versus what happens programming at the library level. And my understanding is that the responsibility primarily for the trustees is that of fiscal responsibility, make sure the funds are there continuing. And I know that the trustees are a sounding board, but I'm not sure to what degree the trustees get involved in trying to, well, I was about to say micromanage, but so I guess I'm cautionary in terms of overstepping my bounds as to what role the trustees have. So Carol, Kathleen, and Sally, is this the type of discussion that the trustees have, or is this more that would filter its way back up with the director saying, "Oh, this is what we're considering"? How much initiative do the trustees take? So, Doug, I'm not trying to skirt the issue. I'm just wondering if this goes beyond the scope of what trustees typically handle.
No, I think you raise a really important distinction. Both Sally and Carol have their hands up. Sally, you can go first.
I think Carol and I probably are thinking along the same lines. You correct me, Carol, of course, if I don't want to speak for you. But you are correct, Tom. It is the role of the trustees to guide, to listen to programs, and to make suggestions. But the trustees do not get down into the weeds and run programs. We leave that to the experts, and that's what they're hired to do, and they're fabulous at it. So we take any and all suggestions and love to get them. But again, we would not be the ones running the programs, but we would certainly be passing along all your thoughts. Always interested in them. Carol? Yeah.
I agree with Sally that we don't, as trustees, don't organize programs.
Mhm.
We make suggestions so a suggestion, what Brindley has raised, I think might be worth mentioning to the library. I think it might be that a program like this, many of the programs are put on or done by people who are not library staff. People decide to develop a program and ask for an opportunity to present it there. Sometimes there are paid performers, things like that. And so I guess I kind of took off my trustee hat when I was saying to Brindley, we should talk, because as I think I've demonstrated, I have a long history of being involved in local government, and it's exactly the kind of thing that would interest me as an individual. And I apologize if I confused anybody with that. Switching hats there midstream.
Yeah. I think we all have high hopes for our new town communications director. I'm not sure if I've got the title position right, but echoing what Brindley was saying during the dam deliberations, it was amazing to those of us that had been pretty heavily involved in the discussion for months or even years to hear people late in the game saying, well, I never heard anything about this. It's like, how could you not have heard? Sometimes, no matter how much time we spend trying to provide opportunities for people to be educated, it's what's that expression? You can lead a horse to water, but they have to want to drink. But anyway, I'll get off the soapbox. Pat, you had your hand up again.
Another quick question. Has the library staff or the board worked with, I'm trying to think of how you get people who don't have transportation to the library, like with the ride or MDV, RTA, to get folks who might want to come to the library there so they can participate and use the resources. I don't know, just, has that been in the vision statement or something? Yeah.
Carol?
I don't remember it being specifically in the vision statement, although Kathleen, Sally, or Tom can correct me. I think because, the MWRTA does have a stop on the common, so it's a short, I'll call it a half block away. But you're right. Well, you didn't say this, but I think it would be great if the MWRTA could offer more service, more frequency, more increased routes. That's outside of our purview. Again, I'm sort of slipping into my history as a select board member to provide, hopefully just provide information this time. But yeah, it's a problem that people who don't have transportation, that's where the bookmobile comes in, at least to a large degree, because they can deliver, as you know, books to a variety of locations, whether it be preschools, whether it be senior housing, like the Mill Street, the facilities on Mill Street. With the bookmobile being down these days, we are all hoping that new bookmobile will come sooner rather than later, but it is taking longer than we would have liked.
Bill, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just first kudos for the library. I have been a frequent user. My son is a digital nomad, and when he's in town, will use the Wi-Fi and really appreciates the opportunity to do that at no cost. But my question, the library may have nothing to do with this, but I'm very curious about those little mini libraries, the little things on poles that are all around town. Is there any relationship? How does that work? Is there any relationship with the library, or are they just kind of there?
Kathleen?
There is no relationship with the library. Start with that, except for that we love the fact that people are putting books out in any way. We do have, you may have noticed on the front lawn during the good weather, we do have a free little art gallery. So we do have a formal relationship with the Natick arts community and in sponsoring that on our property. The free little art libraries are separate. I don't want to misspeak here, but I know in the past, our bookmobile driver, Rose, who's been mentioned already, has made some effort to pass on, I believe, donated books that have come in that could be used to supplement materials in some of the little free libraries. I can't speak to the specifics of that and whether it's going on right now, again, with the bookmobile down and us relying on just a smaller van. Can't speak to whether that's going on now, but we're certainly aware of that that offering or service and interested in it, but it doesn't have a formal relationship.
Thank you.
Sure. Sarah, did you?
So I have not heard of this happening in Natick, but just broadly across the country these days, we're hearing more and more about people trying to ban books and limit access to what kind of information people have access to. And so I'm wondering if you have seen any kind of an uptick in that kind of activity here. I love the thing that they had out on the front lawn of the library this summer about I read this banned book. I thought that was just an amazing, I actually walked in and praised the people for doing it because I thought it was such a wonderful way to engage the community. But I'm just interested, number one, whether this has started to become an issue here in Natick, and if it has, or if it were to happen, kind of what the trustees' role in addressing that would be.
Kathleen? Yeah.
Okay. It's a great question, and I'm so happy that you brought it up. This is a concern and should be a concern for all public libraries in all communities in this country, because it's a very real challenge, I think, to what many of us believe in, and that is democratic and free access to all types of information, to all perspectives. Most public libraries, as they're watching these challenges arise, what they have done is gone back to their collection development policies, which again is that document that is your commitment to define and be transparent about what materials you bring into your library, right? How you choose them, and what you're making a commitment to provide to your community. So most libraries are looking at their collection development policies, being sure that it says and supports what they believe in, and that it's a clearly stated and public document. You'll find a link to ours on the library website, excuse me, under library policies. So in the last 6 months or so, the board has reviewed that policy along with the library administration to be sure it's clear and accurate in terms of how we support materials. There is a provision in that policy for members, residents of Natick to challenge a material that they are uncomfortable with seeing at the library. At this point, we have had one challenge from a Natick resident, and the process is for the director to request that the challenger write up a form and explain why they're challenging that particular book, what they find disagreeable about it, and what they might recommend that the library would have in addition or instead of that particular volume. In response, the director looks carefully at the information that's been provided about the challenge, and then spends a considerable amount of time for any book in each book challenge replying. So going back and revisiting, looking at the book again, looking at when and why we bought it, looking at the review sources we used to choose that book, looking at what other Minuteman libraries have in their collections, and then providing a very thoughtful response in which the director either reaffirms our commitment to providing that book to the community, or might instead agree with the challenge and decide to withdraw that book. So we have had a challenge, I believe, about 4 books from one resident. The director responded very thoughtfully and carefully to those challenges, and that was the end of the challenge, I'm happy to say. If the person who challenged and received responses from the director was not satisfied with those responses, the next step would be for the challenger to go to the board and ask for the board to reconsider those challenges. As a board, it is not our role to pick and choose books. As a board, it is our role to have a collection development policy, to hire and train a staff to implement that policy. And if they are implementing a policy that we've approved, then we are going to stand in support of their choices. Okay, I think that's the best way I can explain it. We are not going to go and read 16 books and get out our highlighter and talk about page 37. We are going to rely on our professional librarians who understand the policy we've approved, and in this case, our commitment to having materials that support all residents in our community, all of them. Right. So in many communities, the board has really been put on the spot. It hasn't happened here yet, but it's something that we're certainly aware of and talking about and being thoughtful about. And I think for people, residents who are concerned about this, support your library, let them know, let the staff know that you support them in their decisions. I love it, Sarah, that you went in and told the staff that you love the banned books display. That's wonderful, because I really feel the majority of residents of Natick do support these values, these democratic values, this freedom to access information. But we all just need to stand up and make a little bit more noise about that, because what we're hearing from is what I think is a minority, probably in most of the country, but I would say in Natick. And the majority, we just need to make a little bit more noise.
Thank you.
But one of the reassuring parts about that answer is that you've got a process, and you followed it, and there's escalation and everything. So thank you. Martin, and your hand up again.
Yeah, I have another question. I just don't want to shortchange anybody. That's such an important question. If anybody else wants to chime in, I could wait a second.
Sally?
I'll just say that it is shocking. It's a problem that I thought had gone out in the 19th century or maybe early 20th century. I never thought that this challenge to collections and libraries would happen in my lifetime, but it is a very real thing that we do need to be concerned about and aware of. And it's the responsibility of the trustees to understand their policy and to support the staff. The staff are the people who are at the front lines. They're the ones that are going to take the abuse of somebody coming in and screaming at them because a book is on the shelf and they maybe had nothing to do with it being there. So it is our responsibility as the leaders to make sure our staff knows that we support them and we are there and for the ultimate decision if it comes to that.
Oh, I wanted to ask a question about I'm sorry.
Martin,
Yes, Martin, go ahead.
Yeah, different subject. My question is also kind of a 20th century question. We 20th century, 21st century now. Sorry. Boy, it's hard to keep up. Hopefully not as controversial.
It's a whole new millennium too.
Yeah, I know. So there's been a real change in libraries in the last 20 or 30 years, of course, with digital technology, and a lot of what people used to read on microfilm or in print is now digital, and some of that's good. But I'm wondering what you envision going forward. Is that trend going to keep going, and what kind of plans or ideas or philosophy do you have on making more, going forward with the sort of digital revolution that we've been in? To anybody?
Sure, Kathleen. Yeah.
I'm not trying to hog the mic here, but
Yeah.
if people would like, I'm always happy to start in on things.
Sure.
So it's a great question. Digital materials are a wonderful thing and a terrible thing at the same time. They're wonderful in that they expand access potentially. You can get to them 24/7. In some cases, many people can look at the same digital resource. In other cases, That's not true. And that is one of the problems with some digital resources. A lot of people don't know that libraries are actually charged more for digital copies of books than the public is. If you went to download something, purchase something for your Kindle, you're going to pay a lot less than we'll pay to bring that resource as a digital copy into the Minuteman system. We also have restrictions you would never imagine. Most digital copies of books can only be read a certain small number of times, and then the access expires, and you have the option of buying it all over again, versus a print book, which you would buy and own forever, and as many people could check it out as wanted to. So the digital materials, they're expensive. They come with a lot of restrictions. It's a whole new model for libraries where they lease materials, they don't own them. So there's a lot of problems, a lot of bumps, but a lot of wonderful things about having material that can be so accessible. So it's a challenge that library directors and their staff deal with all the time: how to balance the money, how to pay for the higher prices of digital things, balance that against print needs. We know people still love books. I love books. We have the speed reads of popular new titles in print. So it's a balancing act of what we have digitally and what we have in print, and it's going to change constantly as circumstances and availability and costs go up and down. So it's not a problem with a solution. It's a problem that's going to be an ongoing challenge, but a good challenge.
Kathleen, does that challenge extend to reference materials? We've attended a couple of talks by, I've forgotten her name, but one of your reference librarians who talks about the digitizing of reference materials and consequently the amazing search capabilities to uncover things from historical newspapers and other historical documents. That just seems fascinating as a new resource.
So,
is there a downside to that too, or no?
Well, what's wonderful about a lot of the reference materials, especially the historical ones, is they're out of copyright. They're out of copyright. So anything that you can put the money towards in the staff time or purchase the services for, then you can do that. And we had a grant to work on digitizing some gaps in our historical Natick news coverage. And the board supported that as well. So we have this wonderful run now of newspapers, and certain government materials, reference materials are actually government materials. Those are copyright free. So there's some wonderful particular historical materials that can be digitized if you have the staff, and the money to pay for the process, and there's no copyright issue. For some other types of reference materials, if they have a publisher and they're for purchase, then we would only be able to purchase a digitized copy and not make it ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Sally, did you want to add something, and then we'll go to Brindley's question?
Yes, I was going to mention that about the newspaper. So thank you, Kathleen, for bringing that up. That is a very good use of our technology, of digital materials. And also, of course, we have our Veterans Oral History Project that's been digitized, and it's a wonderful resource to be able to have that and have that forever as it goes forward. I hope that you will to look up some of those stories. They're really wonderful.
Thank you for that. Oh, Carol, I'm sorry, and then we'll go to you, Brindley.
Just one pitch. If anybody has any old local newspapers, the reference staff would be very happy to get them. Some of you may know Sue Salamoff. Sue moved to Southern California last May, I believe. And I was helping her a little bit with cleaning out. You know how it is. We live in a place for a number of years and accumulate a lot of things. And she had moved things from her prior residence to there. And she had a large box full of Natick newspapers. And I said, you know what? I'll see if the library wants them. And I sorted them through and everything. And then I talked to one of the reference librarians, and he said, we'll take them. He didn't know if he had some of them already or not, but he said, we will take them. So just a point, if you've got something like that, call them up and ask.
Good tip. Thank you, Carol. Brindley.
Yes, thank you. Again, this is just vocal support. I didn't realize that digital access was that much more expensive, and I'm not sure if that includes the books on tape program. But as a mother of a student who has reading challenges and a large circle of friends and acquaintances that I work with who also have students and young adults with reading challenges, the Books on Tape program is wonderful, and we're very grateful for it. So very appreciative of affording the money for that, and hope that it continues in the future.
Great. Thank you. Sarah, you had a question?
So when I raised my hand, I had one question, but then had a second one pop up. In terms of digitizing local news and records and so on. I know in town meeting for a number of years, we've been appropriating a fairly decent amount of money to the town clerk's office to digitize the historical records that are in the clerk's office. Wondering if any of that, has there been any digital component of that the library has been involved in? And the other question, in terms of old newspapers, I don't know whether this would be something to ask the library or the Historical Society. You know, I'm thinking of Johnson School being closed. Our kids went through Johnson School. We had an 11-year span of kids, so we had 16 years worth of Johnson School newsletters and calendars. And, you know, I could see right now it might not be super interesting, but as years go by, it could be an interesting resource for the community. And in terms of thinking of not necessarily keeping things forever, I'm just wondering if those kinds of resources would be of any interest.
Sure, Kathleen.
Just to clarify, the library doesn't do its own digitizing for big projects. These are all sent out.
Okay.
And so there is an expense to having them done. I just wanted to make that clear. So we certainly have an interest in the town clerk's office records being preserved. But we would not be doing that work because we don't have the facility. We send our own materials out.
Yeah, I was
digitized.
wondering more if you collaborated with them on access. In other words, knowing that they have digital records, does the library have any collaboration? And I'm sorry, I'm probably leading us astray from the topic of being a trustee. So if it's more than a 10-second answer, then I withdraw the question.
I think my 10-second answer would be to go to the director and get some information for you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to lead us astray.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Well, mentioning the director's name actually segues back to the question that I wanted to ask, because several times during this discussion, and thank you, by the way, for we've strayed often from what the role of a trustee is, because you folks are doing such a wonderful job of just educating us about the library services and you know, who all provides what. But the director position seems so vitally important. You've spoken highly of the you know, skills of the current director. A lot of us in the town are reeling a little bit from the new news that we're about likely to lose our school superintendent. And I'm wondering, could anybody speak to what process is used to make sure that we keep the director happy? That's probably putting it too simply, but to, you know, to make sure that that the director remains fulfilled in performing their duties, and that there's you know, we don't foster a situation where I want to get out of this town. So yeah, go ahead, Kathleen. You could start us off.
I'll start us off. That's a great question, and it's so important. So first thing I'll tell you is I meet every week with Mickey. And so I have my finger on the pulse, and I know, you know, what's going on, what her concerns are. She's going to tell me things I think to know ahead of the next board meeting. So really good communication is vital. And I think she has that with the board. If she has a concern about something, I think she's very comfortable coming to us. At a higher level as a board, one of the critical things we have to do, as I said, is hire a good director, but then keep her or him. And part of that process was negotiating with the town administration for a fair salary offer, trying to start her off at a good place for a person coming in with her skills and her abilities, and making a statement that we wanted to have her here by that salary offer. It's incumbent on the board to be sure that her salary increases appropriately. She's governed, her salary is governed by the personnel board. But obviously we have an interest in how things are progressing there, and to keep her. I think the thing is to give her freedom. Someone mentioned micromanaging in programs, right? We don't do that. We hired a great director because she knows what she's doing and she's got great ideas and she's built a great staff. So I think a piece of keeping a great director is not micromanaging, being available, having the communication open, but showing trust in that person you hired. So being able to help her fight for resources when she needs them and doesn't have them, being an advocate for her and her vision. I think these are all things that keep a director in place. Mickey came to us after 6 years as assistant director, 6 or 7 years in Sharon. So this is her first director position. And I think she sees room for a lot of growth. She loves the community. She has made great connections with other parts of town government, other organizations, nonprofits in the community. So I see her doing all the right things to be here for a while. So I think the board is doing what it can to keep her. And I think she's made a commitment to the community.
That's great. Tom, you want to add to that?
I just want to quickly piggyback off of what Kathleen said. As someone who's negotiated for years for teacher salaries at Concord, we had a high retention of teachers because of the salaries as well as working conditions. So I think it's vital that the salary for the director be competitive, and that the working conditions be such that the person is happy. So I'm delighted that Kathleen said about giving the director freedom, because nobody wants to be micromanaged. You hire somebody because of the professionalism and because of the skills they bring to the job. Once you've done the hiring, let them do their job and give them support they needed. So I just want to reiterate how important it is to make sure that there is a good salary and good working conditions. It sounds like the board is already of that mind. And I just want to echo my support of what Kathleen said.
Great, good. And Sally?
Segueing off of the financial part, I'll just say that we did go through 2 rounds of search, and Kathleen was on the search committee that did that when our former director left. We went through 2 rounds looking for just the right person. We were not going to just get a library director into the seat, but we wanted to make sure we had someone that wanted to come to Natick, that understood the community. And fortunately, she has now built her own staff. So she's very happy with all the people that she's working with. They work well together. So I think we're in a good, comfortable position at the moment.
That's great to hear. Carol? Yeah.
Well, I'm the 4th one that's here, so I agree with what the other candidates have said. I also feel that our director understands that we are not trying to micromanage her. I believe that she does understand that well, but that when she brings something to the board, we will ask questions. So we have a good working relationship. So, and sometimes I would say 95+% of the time, we say, yeah, that's a great idea. If it's something that requires funding or something like that. Once in a great while, we might say indirectly, yeah, can we rethink that? And I think it's worked out very well for the library. I appreciate the new things that she has added to the programs and to the materials that our library offers. She's a great fit. I too hope she stays forever.
That's great. Why don't we take Brinley's question, and then it is 10:30, which is kind of our unofficial close time. I'd also like to invite any of the incumbent positions folks to speak, if you're willing to, a little bit of a thumbnail about Jerry. So Jerry's the one other candidate that we haven't heard from, but he's also a sitting member, trustee. Is that correct? So it'd be great to hear just maybe a thumbnail of how long he's been serving, or maybe what any of the three of you could say about him. But let's go to Brindley first.
Thank you. I just, since we're recording this and since we're promoting opportunity for everyone in the town to listen to these, and school committee is such a big part of the elections this year, I just want to be sure that as a group, we're, with your question, Doug, we weren't indicating that Dr. Nolan is leaving us for dissatisfaction with our town. She's done an amazing job with our town, and her moving on to Newton is growth in her own career, and not at all dissatisfaction with our school committee or our community and our schools. Newton is twice the size and more than twice the budget, and this is just growth on the ladder for her. She is not leaving because she is dissatisfied with us, and I would hate for us to have given any impression that we weren't doing that. We did just extend her contract last year. She has gotten raises and other accommodations, and we've all been very happy with working with her. And so I didn't want to give anyone any impression that we were negligent in trying to keep her here.
Thank you very much, Brindley, for clarifying that. I didn't mean to imply dissatisfaction on her part. It was more our own sense of loss at losing her, but I spoke loosely, and thank you for tightening that up. So with that, yeah, would anybody like to say a word or two about Jerry's tenure with the board? Yeah, Kathleen.
Just to mention, Jerry, I mentioned is our treasurer currently. He joined the board in 2006, so that's what, about 17 years, doing the math here. Jerry, I'll say this for Jerry. He served on the finance committee for a number of years, and perhaps this is a piece of where that came from, or maybe he served on the finance committee because it's a piece of Jerry. But he always asks the kind of "but what if," or a little bit of a "should we look at it this way?" He often brings a very good thought into the discussion, and one that hadn't been presented yet. I can hear him saying, "Let me play devil's advocate." He does that often. So I have found, I've been very grateful for Jerry's presence on the board, because he just, I don't want to say he keeps us honest, because we're not dishonest, but he asks really good questions, and pokes at things sometimes that the rest of us haven't seen to poke at. So that's a piece of what he brings to the board, I would say.
Thanks, Kathleen. I see both Sally and Carol nodding their heads. Carol, did you want to add to that?
I would just add that, as I've already mentioned, I've been on the trustees for about 2 years now. And during that time, I learned a lot of things. I knew a lot about the library in advance, and a lot of other things, but there were things about being a trustee that I didn't know. And he's been extremely helpful to me. He's met with me several times. He's helped as treasurer. He's helped me with understanding some of the small points about the financial aspects. And I've really appreciated the opportunity to work with him. And I also knew him before. We had overlapped a little bit on the Natick Finance Committee. He was close to getting off when I joined, so I think we overlapped for maybe 2 or 3 years. So I did know him. And he has an education background. I forget the school program that he was the superintendent for. It wasn't a particular town school, but and maybe somebody else could answer that. So he has a great background.
Thanks, Carol. Anything else to add, Sally, or I'm sorry, Tom? Yeah.
I was just going to say that Jerry was involved with the CASE program, a collaborative program, and he was based out of Concord for a little bit. He was in the Ripley building. So I first knew him from my interactions in Concord when I was at the administration building with meetings. And I'll just add, Jerry also has a great sense of humor, warm personality.
Sounds great. All right. Well, thank you all for joining this discussion. It's been great to hear about each of you and your passions, and so much about the library. Forgive us our ignorance and some of the questions that stray from the formal trustee responsibilities. But I guess I just echo a little bit of what Anna said in her text to us earlier, that just once you get into Natick and realize just how chock full it is of dedicated volunteers that are passionate about so many different things, it's like, why would anybody ever want to leave? You know, this has been a real education for me to see yet another example of that in the library community. So I appreciate all of you joining. I wish you all luck in the election. Carol, did you want to add something else? Or?
All I wanted to say was, I just want to remind everybody, you get 5 votes for library trustees. It's not like you just have to vote for one and then take potluck on the other 4. You get 5. There are 6 candidates, as you know, so you can't vote for all of us. I hope you'll use one of your votes for me, but we've got a great candidates here. So thank you.
Yeah, we certainly do. So that will kind of wrap us up. Next week, we move on to our first select board candidate. I think that's Kristen Pope, if I'm remembering correctly. And then we'll go on from there. So enjoy the rest of the week, everyone, and we'll be in touch.